It began in a laundromat on the edge of Atlantic City, the kind of place where everything smelled faintly like dryer sheets and lost hope. Brian Katpurnick stood in front of a vending machine that dispensed socks. He wasn't entirely sure why he was there, only that a letter had arrived at his office that morning, handwritten on the back of a gas bill and folded into a ball. It simply said, "Trouble in motion. Must follow the thread. Starts in AC. Ends where flags bleed." He didn't know what that meant, but something about the way the T in thread was scratched out and written again upside down felt like a clue. So here he was, watching a pair of socks rotate in their slow, artificial orbit. A cat stared at him from a laundry basket, large orange with shoulders like a prizefighter and eyes that had seen 1,000 bad ideas. Thunder did not approve of laundromats, mostly because the noise disrupted his tactical hearing, but he had followed Brian here regardless. The mission, as usual, had not been explained to the team. It never was. Brian tapped the glass. "You think I should go with the Argyle?" Thunder did not blink. "I'll take that as yes," Brian nodded. 5 blocks away, Mizzy lounged on a fire escape above a bookstore that only sold true crime novels and romance anthologies written under government pseudonyms. Her tail flicked precisely once every 8 seconds. Below her, a man in a gray suit tried to purchase a newspaper with a coin shaped like a fish. Mizzy watched, unimpressed. The bookstore's side door opened. Lady slipped out, carrying a rolled-up city zoning map in her teeth. She darted across the alley without a sound, leapt onto a crate, then vanished into the shadows behind a billboard featuring a smiling astronaut and a bottle of luxury water. Back at the laundromat, Brian's phone buzzed. The screen displayed only a single word: inbound. He turned just in time to see a small envelope slide under the door. No one was outside. He opened it carefully. Inside was a printout, a shipment manifest, marked with military courier codes and black bar redactions. The destination was listed as VIP Executive Limousine Service, Bedminster NJ, do not delay. Below that, a handwritten scrawl, pair with cheese type 7A, effects unpredictable, transport immediately. Brian looked up. Cheese? Why is it always cheese? He didn't know that, 70 miles away, the mouse had already read the same manifest. And unlike Brian, the mouse knew what 7A meant. It had been first documented in 1962 during a closed-door tasting event involving 3 culinary agents and 1 captured druid. The cheese had no official name, only a designation. Chernamum lactis. It had once made a man believe he could speak fluent saxophone. Another had reportedly merged with a pine tree for 46 minutes. The mustard was the catalyst, but not just any mustard. Silesian black, aged in caves, sealed in lead-laced wax, and blessed under a lunar eclipse by a silent sect of monks who had taken a vow to only speak in menu items. It amplified the cheese's effects. Together, the pairing could supposedly unlock time-layered perception, or destroy it entirely. The mouse had found this out by sneaking into a broken server unit beneath a deli in Annapolis, where an NSA analyst moonlighted as a gourmet condiment reviewer. He had watched the analyst eat a spoonful of the mustard with standard cheddar. The analyst had immediately declared bankruptcy in Latin and disappeared into a mirror. Now the mouse had tracked the mustard to a secured convoy en route to Bedminster, where the former president was scheduled to give a private donor speech. The speech had been planned quietly, with only selective press access, but someone knew, and someone was sending something else to that location. The mouse's tail twitched. He would need to be in that limo, and he would need to get there before the delivery did. Meanwhile, back in Atlantic City, Luna had found a pretzel. She didn't eat it. She just carried it, delicately, through an open back door into the laundromat, placed it on the floor, and sat down beside it. Brian saw her, looked at the pretzel, then knelt beside her. "Is this a sign?" Luna stared at him. Her eyes sparkled. "I'll take that as yes." Thunder blinked once. Henrietta appeared then through the broken vent near the dryer bank. She had been gone for hours. She dropped a half-shredded flyer at Brian's feet. It was for a history realignment conference happening in Tulsa. It featured speakers from an unregistered think tank and a mysterious sponsor labeled only as Project Bluebird. Brian nodded thoughtfully, turning the flyer sideways. "It's always Tulsa," he murmured, "just like the yogurt riots." None of the cats interrupted. Wanda, at that moment, was inside the pipe system beneath a gas station on Route 202, skimming data off leftover Ethernet cables dumped illegally by a contractor who had once tried to install fiber in a field. Her receiver pinged with a name, Bluebird, and with it, a symbol, the same stylized B that had been etched on a crate in the mustard shipment manifest. In the skies above New Jersey, Major Talon circled. The golf course below glittered with distant security lights. In the distance, the Trump National Golf Club's private event area glowed in the fog like a stadium of whispers. Talon dipped his wings. The limo was inbound. The mouse was already beneath it. Hidden in the undercarriage, pressed against the chassis, he clung to a bolt with 2 claws and a gum wrapper. The limo hummed with security frequencies, but the mouse had once bypassed a NORAD login with a dried cranberry and a sigh. This was simpler. He had 6 minutes to breach the cargo lock beneath the seat. Then he'd know if the mustard was real. Inside the limo, there was no railgun, no exotic weapons, just armored plating, custom seats, and a sealed case. The mouse opened it. Inside, 2 vials, one marked SBM1, the other a slice of cheese with a date. July 13, the day of the rally. The mouse froze. This wasn't just indulgence. Someone intended to give the former president the pairing that day, hours before he was scheduled to appear on stage, and the effect, if rumors were true, might do more than alter perception. It might reveal truths or secrets he wasn't meant to remember. Secrets tied to 2020, to Tulsa, to Project Bluebird. The mouse's nose twitched. He sealed the case. He needed to think. And if he knew anything about the way EATU worked, he knew this was now larger than just the cheese. It was a signal, and someone or something wanted it seen. The limo came to a crawl just outside the rally perimeter. A long, winding curve of slow-moving motorcade units, armored SUVs, press vans, and private donor vehicles stretched around the east entrance of the club, creating a claustrophobic bottleneck. The mouse could feel the metal shift beneath him as the convoy hit its 3rd stop-and-go in 12 minutes. The smell of engine coolant mixed with something more. Synthetic. He knew that scent. It was the kind of polymer used in plastic-coated bioseals. This limo wasn't just carrying the mustard and cheese. It was transporting something else. Inside the cabin, barely 2 inches above him, were feet. Shoes. A pair of leather dress shoes and a pair of soft orthopedic soles. The conversation was muffled but unmistakably real. "I still think we should wait until the Tulsa trial runs conclude," someone said. "You don't test perception triggers on senators," the other voice replied, lower, older. "You test them on someone immune to reputational damage." The mouse's ears twitched. Above him, the vials shifted inside their cradle. The convoy braked again. The mouse slipped slightly and jammed his paw into the wheel housing to hold steady. That's when he felt it, the tiny tremor in the steel. A magnetic relay pulsing in time with a signal. Someone was tracking the cheese. Meanwhile, Brian had taken the wrong train 3 times and was now convinced he was being redirected by fate, or the MTA. "I don't think it's Brooklyn," he muttered, studying the station map upside down, but the seagull looked very decisive when it pooped near the Jersey line. Gray was already 2 steps ahead. She had tapped into the station's camera grid and was watching the convergence of donor traffic, Secret Service deployment, and protester groups gathering around the main entrance. A school bus marked American Re-Education Symposium had parked illegally near the service lot and was now leaking glitter and historical inaccuracies. Luna sat in the driver's seat of an abandoned flower delivery van nearby, staring out the window. No one questioned her. She looked like she belonged there. In the sewer pipe beneath the west retaining wall, Wanda coughed violently and slapped a switch to flush out the nerve-dampening detergent someone had dumped into the public drain system. Her tail spasmed. She tapped a wet keyboard with one fin. "Signal jammed," she whispered. "Satellite feedback is looping. Someone's spoofing EATU comms." Back inside the limo, the mouse was panicking. The crowd was gathering. The route had been modified due to unplanned scaffolding work, a factor that hadn't been logged by the Secret Service's last-minute update packet. The result, the limo was now crawling past the south service lane, near the rally stage. Barricades were being hastily repositioned. Then it happened. A security agent in the lead SUV opened his door. Just enough. Just briefly. The mouse took the chance. He bolted. Small, fast, nearly invisible, he dove beneath the side mirror, darted through the underbody slats, and landed beneath the curb lip near a vendor table selling patriotic foam fingers and unauthorized ketchup popsicles. He was in the crowd. It was loud. Smelled like wet t-shirts, sunscreen, and political tension. And it was tightly packed, the kind of space that turned minutes into tightrope acts. The mouse tried to climb up the back of a folding chair, lost traction, and triggered a tourist to drop a soda. The splash hit the shoe of a man standing at the edge of the service scaffolding, a man who had been staring through a modified lens scope, quietly syncing his breathing. He twitched, the lens refocused. He hadn't fired yet. His finger moved. He adjusted his stance. Then he caught a glimpse of something beneath the stage, a blur of gray fur, a tail, a twitch. He reacted, just half a second early. The gun fired. Screams. Security scattered. A red streak traced the air. And from across the press barricade, Brian Katpurnick tripped over a discarded megaphone, collided with the vendor table, and flipped end over end into the base of the scaffolding. Everyone saw it. Everyone assumed he had tackled the shooter. The mouse did not look back. He slid beneath the bleachers, heart racing, tail bleeding from a scrape, mustard scent still in his nose. The vials were still in the limo. But now the cheese was missing. He had triggered something, but not what he expected. And above the chaos, an eagle circled once, paused in its arc, then vanished into the light. The envelope arrived unmarked, folded 5 times, and sealed with a faint impression of a hawk's talon. Brian Katpurnick retrieved it from the inside lip of his office toaster. He did not question how it had arrived there. The toaster had delivered stranger things in the past. Once it returned a library card from 1978. Another time, a toothpick with coordinates to an Icelandic thrift shop. But today, it was the envelope. And the envelope contained an invitation. Blue Origin Flight number 407B, April 14th, desert viewing lot, no cameras, no questions. Brian squinted at the paper, then sniffed it. It smelled faintly of cedar and chili powder. Thunder watched from the windowsill, eyes half-lidded, paws curled neatly beneath his chest. The orange tabby narrowed his gaze. "This isn't good," he muttered to himself. From beneath a filing cabinet, Gray crept out and blinked once at Thunder, then at the paper. Her voice, soft and deliberate, came low. "Blue Origin doesn't send invitations to private detectives," Thunder growled. "They do when someone wants him there." On the corner desk, Lady had dismantled a paperclip and used it to carve a series of numbers into a legal pad. The coordinates formed a triangle, the same one Gray had traced in cat litter 3 days earlier during a late-night surveillance nap. Brian looked up suddenly. "Of course," he whispered. "It's a launch. It's a viewing lot. They want me to observe something." He paused. "Or someone." Henrietta entered through the mail slot and dropped a small envelope at his feet. It was empty. Brian picked it up, turned it over, and nodded sagely. "Yep, that confirms it." The team watched silently as Brian began packing a bag full of peanut butter crackers, socks, and a Polaroid camera that hadn't worked since the summer of '03. 2,000 miles west, a capsule touched down in the desert with the soft hiss of landing jets. The crowd watching from behind the barricades applauded politely. Among them was a woman in a floral scarf who blinked 3 times at the sun, then looked sharply at the capsule. Her hand gripped the rail. "What was that?" she whispered. The capsule door had moved. Just a twitch, enough to register. Then, nothing. The announcer on the speaker didn't mention it. The cameras cut to the stars and stripes flapping in the wind, but a few people saw it, enough to whisper, enough to start rumors. Inside the capsule, something was still recalibrating. In another corner of the world, beneath a manhole grate in downtown Cleveland, Wanda was receiving a strange burst of signal through the storm drain mesh. It was encrypted, nonlinear, and it pulsed once with a high-frequency tone that made her tail straighten like a steel rod. She blinked, ran a check. "No way," she said aloud. The code signature was Brian's, but dated 5 days ahead. Back in New Jersey, Brian stepped off the bus into the edge of a windstorm. The desert wasn't supposed to be this cold at this time of year, but his coat stuck to his back anyway. He squinted toward the launch pad and the line of guests forming near the media barricade. Thunder had arrived first, hidden in the undercarriage of a Tesla that reeked of sunscreen and failed startup dreams. Luna followed, bouncing gently across roadside barriers as if they were nothing more than stepping stones in a pond. The viewing lot was already crowded. Security was loose but present, and Brian had already identified 3 different flavors of badge fraud. He had once dated a woman who did forgery, briefly, before she tried to replace his fingerprints with sushi rice. He stood now, watching the capsule, watching the crowd, and something began to buzz faintly in his coat pocket. He reached in. The envelope was glowing, just slightly, just enough, and across the desert, inside the capsule that had already landed, a figure moved. Brian would remember nothing of what happened next, not clearly. There was a sound like fabric tearing backward, a sensation of air folding in on itself, the smell of mustard, not the cheap kind, something ancient, something aged. He took 1 step forward, and then he wasn't there. The air inside the capsule was thick, not hot, not cold, not dry. It was dense, as though time had pooled into vapor. Brian blinked, and for a moment the edges of the world shimmered. He could still see the desert beyond the capsule's tiny window, but it was older, or newer. He wasn't sure which. There was a chair, a metallic one, bolted to the floor. In it, a small sealed case labeled only with a symbol, a mustard flower etched in gold. Next to it sat a wedge of pale, weak, crumbling cheese wrapped in a bandage of wax-stamped parchment. Brian tilted his head. "I am not certified for this," he whispered. Somewhere deep in the capsule's belly, a panel hummed and retracted. A voice, not synthetic, but distant, almost echoing across a canyon of seconds, spoke. Temporal artifact chamber stabilized. Sequence initiation locked. Personal divergence window, 4 minutes. He turned slowly. No one else was inside, yet somehow the seat across from him was warm. At the exact moment Brian touched the case, not opened it, just touched it, Thunder, 5 states away, sat upright on the edge of a museum roof in Philadelphia and hissed low through his teeth. Something's wrong. Gray, perched beside an inactive security camera in a half-built hotel across the street, flicked her tail twice. "I felt it too," she said. Lady, curled up in a microwave crate full of receipts, raised her head just as the wind changed. In a sewer beneath Tulsa, Wanda coughed and thrashed as her antenna suddenly pulled power through an unknown surge. "It's him," she rasped, watching her data screen scramble itself into ASCII symbols that spelled one word, mustard. In the present, or what counted as the present, Brian stood now not in the capsule, but outside it, back in the desert. But something was off. The dust on the ground had shifted. The clouds were wrong. People hadn't arrived yet. A billboard read, "Trump, rally postponed July 13th, moved to primary grounds." And below it, "Warning, mustard transportation convoy, right lane must exit." Brian stared. "Wait," he muttered. "That was yesterday?" He looked around. The sun hadn't moved, but time had. Behind him, a lone security guard exited a trailer and looked in Brian's direction. Then paused. There was no one there. Brian had moved. He now stood in a New Jersey parking lot, the donor entrance to the Trump National Golf Club, 3 hours before the rally would begin. He staggered. "This is not how I time travel," he said aloud, steadying himself on a news van. Atop that van, Henrietta blinked twice and immediately leapt into action, darting toward a food truck marked Artisan Pickles and Ethical Dijon. Inside the motorcade, stuck between a donor limo and a decoy SUV, the mouse was chewing through a wire casing with both urgency and finesse. He wasn't trying to disable anything. He was trying to get out. He had been trapped beneath the seat since the night before, when the limo had been sealed and staged for a quiet transport of an unknown diplomatic parcel. That parcel, he had since learned, was a decoy for the mustard. But the cheese? The cheese had vanished. Or more precisely, it had diverged. He didn't know why. He only knew the temperature sensors had glitched at exactly the moment the capsule in the desert landed. Now, the convoy crawled. A child dropped a pretzel outside. It rolled toward the barricade. A man picked it up, turned, and paused. Brian stood 20 feet away, staring at the limo. He had seen it in the capsule, not in detail, not in form, but as an idea, a concept woven into the fibers of the timeline. "This is the epicenter," he whispered. He reached for the envelope, still glowing faintly in his coat. Inside was a second page he hadn't noticed before. "Do not prevent the event. You are already part of it. Your role is to observe the mustard." Thunder, listening through a hacked surveillance mic in the golf course gazebo, turned to Luna. "He's looping. He's in it already." Luna didn't speak. She just leapt off the table and stared at the service entrance gate. Then up. The sky was the same, but it had changed. Above the crowd, a news chopper tilted its rotor angle, slightly too early, responding to a gust of wind that hadn't happened yet. Below, the mouse dropped into the under-limo wheel cavity, scraping his tail. He would make it out, but not yet. Not until everything that had already happened again. Brian stepped forward. In his pocket, the envelope disintegrated into soft ash, and behind him, the capsule door, in a desert miles away, closed again, as if it had never opened. The security perimeter around the golf club had been reshaped twice in the past hour. First by a last-minute adjustment to the stage scaffolding blamed on wind stress readings, though Thunder's review of the schematics showed otherwise. Someone had forced the adjustment to redirect line of sight away from the western service corridor. Second, by an unnamed donor demanding a different vehicle entry route. This created a 3-minute gap in vehicle checkpoint coverage, which, for a mouse with a bruised tail and a smuggled parchment diagram of the limo's undercarriage, was barely enough time. The mouse wriggled free from the brake line and dropped into the grass. The convoy hadn't stopped, just slowed. Enough for him to roll clear of the vehicle's shadow and dive into a discarded coffee cup that still smelled like bad decisions and almond syrup. He emerged moments later behind a vendor's cart, where Henrietta was already waiting beside a crate of unsold pretzels. "You're early," she said, flicking her tail. "No," the mouse replied. "I'm already late. The cheese is missing." Henrietta twitched. "Cheese doesn't just disappear." "In this timeline, it does," the mouse growled. "Someone looped, and now I'm not even sure if the mustard is from this strand of continuity or the last." Henrietta blinked slowly. "You're going to want to get out of here before the security team sees a talking rodent." The mouse bared his teeth. "Let them try." 2 levels up on the clubhouse's balcony, Luna watched the flags shift direction. The wind didn't match the forecast. She meowed once, long, lilting, a tone they had agreed upon only for time loop detection. Gray heard it from her perch on the lighting rig and stiffened. Her ears rotated backward, then forward. She adjusted her spy lens. Brian was standing exactly where he shouldn't be, not where security logs said he would be, not where his own memories claimed he had been. He stood near the fire lane's edge, next to a food vendor with a broken umbrella, holding what looked like a sticker. Lady moved fast. From a maintenance tunnel across the green, she launched herself through an HVAC duct, down the slope, and out the panel behind the ice cream cooler. She landed softly, then knocked over a tray of promotional ketchup packets. The splash caught Brian's shoe. Brian looked down. The red stain on his loafer drew his eye to the golf cart beside him. A crate rested inside it, marked Bluebird Recovery Unit, Tulsa Archives. Squinted. He didn't remember it being there. He looked again. The crate was gone. His head swam. And far above, unnoticed, a drone captured his expression in a silent frame, a man aware of something having changed, but unsure what. From the news chopper overhead, an operator adjusted her lens. "Subject 9B has entered the temporal edge," she said. "Confirmed," a voice replied. "Mark it. Fold line integrity still holding. Loop begins in 32 seconds. In the motorcade, the limo crawled forward again. The driver was humming something under his breath, unaware that the back seat had shifted temperature twice in the last minute. The case still rested where it had been placed, but inside the cheese was wrong. Not just missing. It had changed consistency. The mustard vial vibrated, faintly. The mouse, from his vantage point beneath a catering table, saw the shimmer of air ripple past Brian like heat on asphalt. The line of causality was curling. He whispered low, "He's about to trigger it." Brian stepped forward without realizing. He heard the crack of a bottle breaking behind him and turned, only to see a girl with a souvenir pin bending to pick up her dropped lemonade. But when he turned back, the limo was already stopped. The president would exit in 22 seconds. Thunder, hidden in the roof scaffolding, gave the signal. Wanda rerouted her sewer feed into the backup generator, triggering a flicker in the lights. Gray adjusted her surveillance drone to overlay thermal data. A ripple pulsed across the parking lot. Luna whispered to the wind, and the pigeons took flight. And in that moment, Brian's memories clicked. The capsule, the cheese, the mustard. He knew what was coming. He knew he couldn't stop it, but he knew where to stand. He stepped into the light, the shooter moved, and history surged forward. The silence that came just before the shot felt like the world had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. From atop the service scaffolding, Thunder's fur stood on end. He was crouched behind a mesh lighting grid, scanning the crowd below. He didn't need to see the shooter. He could feel the tremor in the air, the shift in focus from chaos to fatal intent. Everything narrowed, everything aligned. Brian was in the exact place he had been in the first time. But this time, he wasn't surprised. He turned slowly, just enough to see the flash of metal glint in the light, just enough to know the sound was coming next, just enough to step 1 inch to the left. The gunshot tore through the air. A scream fractured the crowd. Someone dropped a phone. The security detail reacted with practiced instinct. But the bullet hit nothing. Or rather, it hit a plastic balloon arch behind Brian that exploded with a pop and a spray of confetti. Brian stared at it, then at his own hands. He was holding a souvenir flag. He did not remember picking it up. Above, in a private viewing booth, the woman from the desert, the one who had seen the capsule door shift, whispered something into her sleeve. "It's folding," she said. "He's correcting it. He doesn't know, but he is." Inside the limo, chaos reigned. The doors locked. The president was secured by 2 agents who moved with mechanical precision. The mustard vial began to glow faintly, just once, then went dark. The mouse, clinging to the interior carpet lining beneath the rear axle, was finally dislodged by the vibration from the emergency override protocol. He tumbled into the grass and immediately bolted beneath the lip of a curbside drain. Henrietta met him there. "Too close," she said. "I didn't cause it," the mouse snapped. "Not this time." "You're sure?" "I was trapped until 10 seconds ago." Henrietta gave him a skeptical look, but said nothing. The shooter had been tackled. By whom, no one could say. A man with a hat? A girl in a blue shirt? A tourist group from Delaware had conflicting stories. What no one saw was Brian, face pale, standing perfectly still, watching the exact trajectory of the bullet in his mind. He'd seen it before. He'd already seen it. He was too early. He turned and walked toward the golf cart parking area. No one stopped him. They were too busy writing headlines. Mizzy sat beneath a canopy near the donor tables, licking her paw with dramatic disinterest. Behind her, Gray stitched together 5 different surveillance feeds into one fluid frame. Brian arriving, Brian moving, Brian avoiding the bullet on purpose. Lady was already at the printer, printing falsified ID passes to get the team out clean. Wanda's sewer feed picked up a burst of communication from an unregistered uplink tower in Kansas. The message was short. Tulsa compartment confirmed. Phase 3 artifact not recovered. Loop integrity compromised but stable. She shuddered. Back in the capsule, or what was left of it, in the desert, time folded in again, briefly, just enough for a gust of wind to knock over a discarded seatbelt harness. The capsule's onboard system registered a heartbeat, then silence. Brian stood on the roof of the visitor center an hour later, looking out over the green. His hands were empty. His mind wasn't. He remembered the cheese now. He remembered the mustard. He remembered being in the capsule, past, present, possibly future, and seeing a version of himself not quite aligned with the one in the mirror. Luna sat beside him, silent, tail curled delicately. Brian nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "I didn't stop anything." Luna bumped his elbow with her head. "But maybe I didn't start it either." The sun set. That night, after the debriefs, the press conferences, the sweep of the field, and the locking down of every inch of footage, Brian returned to his office. He opened the door. Everything was as he left it. The messy desk, the ancient typewriter, the plant he hadn't watered in 2 weeks. Except one thing. A small, sealed bottle. It sat perfectly centered on his desk blotter. No label, no fingerprint, just the faint scent of something spicy, something ancient, something that didn't belong in this timeline at all. Brian sat down slowly. He didn't touch it. Not yet. Brian stared at the bottle. It wasn't imposing. No swirling vortex inside, no arcane inscriptions etched into the glass, just a small, heavy vial of mustard sealed with wax, a dark amber hue pressed with a symbol he'd only seen once before. In the capsule. Backwards. He didn't move for a long time. Outside, the sky churned, not dramatically, not apocalyptically, just enough for the clouds to slip past each other out of sequence. You wouldn't notice if you weren't already twisted sideways through time. Brian noticed. Luna curled on a shelf above the door, opened one eye. It glinted silver, caught in the flicker of a desk lamp that hadn't been turned on. She said nothing, but her ears flicked toward the bottle. It wasn't just the mustard. It was when the mustard came from. Thunder padded into the office like a diplomat arriving late to a volatile summit. He paused by the doorframe, eyes narrowing at the desk. He can't open that. Gray followed, silent, her tail tip tracing invisible spirals in the air. He won't, she said. Won't or shouldn't. Thunder growled. That line's been blurry for weeks. On the rooftop, Henrietta watched the city through binoculars stolen from a mall cop who was still wondering why his walkie-talkie only played opera now. She adjusted the focus. Movement at the museum. She hissed. They're still cleaning up from Tulsa. They don't know the cheese was never in the crate. Wanda's voice crackled over the subfloor comm system. Confirmed. Bluebird officials still chasing metadata phantoms. They think Brian's part of a code leak. They're wrong, but only technically. Down in the sewer system, Wanda adjusted her fins. And for the record, she added, that mustard isn't inert. I ran spectral scans. It's reactive to proximity, specifically temporal residues. Thunder winced. He was in the capsule. Gray's ears went back. He looped. Lady meowed quietly from the windowsill, then pawed at a chalkboard diagram of interconnected timelines. She erased a single arrow, then drew a dotted one looping from the desert to Bedminster, then back to the office. Brian finally exhaled. It was all already done, wasn't it? Thunder growled low. Depends on if you believe in causality. Brian blinked at him. I usually believe in mustard expiration dates. Luna purred, just once. A low hum that, to the other cats, meant, he's starting to remember. And he was. The strange cold inside the capsule, the flinch that wasn't his, the moment the shooter missed because someone, possibly Brian himself, had nudged a folding chair 4 inches to the left 2 days earlier in a timeline no longer accessible. There were 2 Brians, maybe 3, and they all knew different parts of the same ending. He looked again at the bottle, not to open it, just to understand it. The wax was cracked slightly along one edge, not enough to break the seal, but enough to suggest it had already been opened, somewhere, somewhen. He pressed his fingers against the glass. There was a brief flicker, a sound like a distant jazz trio trapped in a jar, and then a vision. Not clear, not cinematic, just an imprint, a memory that hadn't happened yet. Brian, standing at the edge of a different rally, rain falling, a cheese sample pressed into a guard's hand, a whisper in his own voice, "Don't let the mustard touch metal." He gasped. The vision vanished. Luna was on the desk now, paw resting on the bottle. Brian nodded. "I'm not supposed to fix it," he murmured. "I'm supposed to keep it moving." Thunder grunted. "The timeline folds, but only where there's weight." Gray's tail flicked. "He's the fulcrum." Henrietta radioed in from the museum roof. Federal cleanup unit just found a fake cheese shell embedded in a photo prop. They think it's part of a psychological op. Lady tapped a paw on her chalkboard. "I think it is, too." Brian stood. He didn't take the mustard. He just left the office door open. A breeze moved through, and somewhere, in a different capsule, a chair turned itself around. The chair spun once, slowly, without sound. It wasn't a mechanical rotation. It was something older, something that moved in the absence of direct force, like the memory of movement echoing forward. Inside the capsule, the lights dimmed to a flicker, then surged into full brightness, revealing nothing but emptiness. No passengers. No sound. Just the faint scent of ozone, time-burned cloth, and a trace of something pungent. Mustard. Not spilled. Not opened. Just present. Meanwhile, across 3 time zones and 3 timeline deviations, Brian Katpurnick was halfway through a box of animal crackers he'd found in a file cabinet labeled 2020 Flare Contingency. He wasn't hungry. He just needed the pattern. The lion-shaped ones always came with a clue. From his couch, which sagged awkwardly in the middle as though it had hosted a small party of raccoons in a previous life, Brian traced the crumbs into a triangle. 1 point, the cheese. 1 point, the mustard. 1 point, himself. He stared at the pattern, then licked a finger and gently slid a giraffe cracker to the center. "That's the anomaly," he murmured. Outside, Thunder paced along the rooftop ledge. He paused every few feet to scan the street below, not for threats, but for Connie breaks. Time loops left fractures, hints. Mailboxes painted the wrong shade of blue. Tires scuffed against curbs before they should have arrived. People pausing mid-step, confused as if they'd already walked a path that hadn't existed yet. Gray joined him. "He's getting close," Thunder nodded. "He's trying to build the loop manually." "He's trying to close it," Gray corrected. Big difference. Back in the sewer grid, Wanda floated in front of a cracked monitor. The feed was noisy, jittering with interference from a nearby transformer station. She slapped it with her tail. The screen cleared, revealing a thermal snapshot of the golf course from 2 days earlier. There, in the lower right corner, was the shooter, the exact moment the weapon had discharged. But something else shimmered in the frame, something off. She zoomed in. A blur, almost a shape, standing just behind the vendor cart. Almost, but not quite, Brian, except the jacket was different. The lapel was reversed. The watch was on the wrong wrist. She hissed into the comm line. He looped again. Luna, curled on the windowsill, blinked twice. She knew. Brian had been in more than one strand of this story. Some versions didn't return. Others left artifacts, bottles, cheese, the occasional lost sock that hummed faintly if you held it under moonlight. But this Brian? This one might still finish the loop intact. Inside the office, Brian was now surrounded by open folders, not from his own case files, but ones he had never seen before. Pages with typed briefings. Surveillance photos stamped with defunct Project Bluebird, Tulsa Cell. A sticky note with the words, "Don't eat the cheese twice." He didn't remember writing it. He checked the timestamp, tomorrow's date. He set the note aside and reached for the mustard bottle again. Still sealed, still humming ever so slightly in his hand. And then, for just a moment, it wasn't. The wax flickered. The air bent. The shadows on his office floor shifted backward by 1 inch. And standing in the doorway was Brian. But not this Brian. Not quite. Same face, same coat. No shadow. He didn't speak. He just looked at the bottle, then at the desk. Then without a sound, he nodded once and vanished. Thunder barged into the room seconds later, fur on edge, claws halfway out. I smelled something fold. Brian was still staring at the empty doorway. "I was here," he said softly. "I know. I mean, I was here before, just now." Thunder looked at the desk. The mustard was gone. So was the note. Only the crumbs remained. Brian sat down slowly. He felt tired. Not like he needed sleep, more like he'd already lived this moment too many times. He rubbed his eyes. "Do we have any idea what this means?" Thunder turned. "No, but it's probably your fault." Luna purred from behind the curtain. Lady dropped a new blueprint on the floor. Henrietta checked in from the fire escape with word that something had reactivated the capsule again, but only for 4.6 seconds. Gray was already in the wires, uploading a backup to a folder labeled Timeline C, if it sticks this time. And far below, in the storm drains, the mouse watched the footage from the rally play again, frame by frame. He paused it where Brian had blinked at the shooter's flash. Zoomed in. There it was, the glint, not from the gun, from the mustard jar, in Brian's hand. But that had never happened, until it did. The lights in the office dimmed, not because the power went out, but because time had grown too thick in the corners. Brian leaned back in his chair. It creaked like it was tired of being part of this story. The bottle of mustard was gone. Again, but not missing. He could feel it, like an aftertaste of something powerful, like a smell that hadn't been in the room, but now clung to every object just the same. It had moved forward or backward or sideways. The desk clock ticked irregularly, 3 seconds, then a pause, then 1, then 5. The mechanism wasn't broken, just undecided. Wanda's voice broke through the comm line with a tone none of the team had heard her use before. Tight, strained, reverent. The capsule opened again. Thunder, standing beside the radiator, snapped to attention. "What came out?" Wanda didn't answer right away. Then, no one, but the seat was warm. Lady, halfway through rewriting a scrambled incident log from the Tulsa field team, looked up. "Another Brian?" Gray's tail flicked twice. Or a folded one. Across the room, Luna leapt onto Brian's desk. She circled once, then settled against the spot where the mustard had been. She didn't look at him, but her body language told him enough. He was the loop. Henrietta called in from the clock tower 3 blocks down, where she had been following a van full of classified dairy samples headed toward an archive center in D.C. "They've retracted the cheese manifests," she said. "Bluebird's pulling assets. They think the loop's closed." Thunder growled. "They're wrong. He's still in it." Brian was listening, not to the comms, to the shape of things, to the way the air tasted. He stood up and walked to the mirror. His reflection stared back. For a heartbeat, it was slightly late. Just a blink. He checked his jacket pocket, empty. Checked the coat rack. Nothing. And then, there it was. A shadow on the floor. Small, cylindrical. He crouched, the mustard jar. Back again, placed neatly. Not by accident. There was a note attached now, curled at the edges. He opened it carefully. If you're reading this, then the version of you who remembered to stop remembering has already gone. Do not open the jar. You've already opened it once. This time, let it stay sealed. History will heal. There was no signature, just the faint scent of cedar and old clocks. Brian sat back down. Everyone on the team was silent. Even the Roomba in the hallway, which had been dragging a receipt from 1976 in its wheels all morning, had finally stopped moving. The timeline was closed. Maybe not resolved. Maybe not repaired. But closed. Brian placed the jar back on his desk, this time carefully. Centered. He reached into the top drawer and pulled out a battered manila folder titled Unfinished Loops. He tucked the jar inside, shut the drawer. Luna hopped down and rubbed against his leg. She looked up at him and blinked twice. Brian smiled. I know. I remember enough. He turned out the light. Behind him, the jar pulsed gently in the dark. Once, then again, then never again. Somewhere in the desert, the capsule door stayed shut. Somewhere on a surveillance server no longer accessible, a moment flickered out, a frame erased, a duplicate overwritten, and somewhere far below, in a pipe with just enough clearance for a rodent carrying a microfilm reel, the mouse trudged forward, muttering to himself. Still didn't get the cheese, but he smiled. Because maybe next time, he already had.